So, if you're a Utah Jazz fan, last night had to be one of the more frustrating nights ever. I mean, these last two games have been absolutely killer for the Jazz as they now fall to the Clippers, game six. And man, it was that is a painful game, man. I mean, we watched in the first half the Jazz go up. Donovan seems determined. This whole team made an emphasis on being able to get into the paint. Um, Clarkson shows up in the second, and it just, you kind of sit there at halftime and you're saying, man, we're up by 20, and we haven't even gotten Conley going. And so at that point, you're super optimistic, and then the whole dilemma of Rudy Gobert comes in as far as this series. The he comes in and just is absolutely not what the Jazz needed as far as their defensive game plan goes. So we're gonna break that down a little bit. Perhaps to the Clippers, they go win in Utah for Game 5, and they come back home and finish the job. They could have easily folded in this game and said, you know what, we still got Game 7. Because in the second quarter there, when the Jazz got up by a little bit more than 10, it did look like the Clippers kind of just folded, and they're kind of like, well, we don't know what we're doing on offense now. A little bit off balance and out of flux there. Absolutely crazy to watch that first half of the Jazz and then see them in the second half. But yeah, let's get into it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the Rudy Gobert dilemma. Man, this is a really, and you see NBA Twitter get in on it. You see some analysts get in on it. There's gonna be a lot of people on Monday that will probably talk about. Actually, I don't even know if this game's gonna get too much coverage by the big media of the big sports media, because it happened on a Friday night. We have Saturday, and then by Sunday there will already be the first game played of the Western Conference Finals between the Clippers and the Phoenix Suns. But I do want to talk about the Gobert dilemma, because I think it's just a situation where it's a poor matchup for the Jazz. They come into this game, really into the series, and Dallas looked like they could have taken down the Clippers, having a 3-2-1 or a 3-2 lead in Dallas, and being in Dallas for Game 6, and could have ended it, but they didn't. And yeah, you saw that the Clippers used their 5-out method, the offense and really defense. And it's a really interesting situation now, because the 5-out shows that you can limit these interior defenders by a lot. Now, does it work on Anthony Davis? Probably not. But will it work on Rudy? Absolutely, it did. It destroyed. There's so many possessions where, I think we're going to focus on Terrence Mann tonight. In the game between the Clippers and the Jazz in Game 6, and say, oh man, Terrence Mann, scores 39 points. He takes more threes than he had ever taken in his, if you call college professional. I mean, I know it's not technically professional, but he's taken more threes than I think he ever thought he would make or take and make. He goes 7 of 10 from 3. And was just a huge boost to this team in the third quarter. And, rewatching the game, you can't really deny the Jazz for being in that situation and allowing him to shoot, because it's a double-edged sword, man. And that's what the Clippers present that not any other team really can present that well, is they basically will say, hey, we're going to spread you out 5-out, and we're not going to have a post guy. We're essentially going to punt on the rim protector because we believe in our perimeter defense. And then we also don't have any confidence that the Jazz are going to be able to beat us off the dribble. So the Rudy Gobert dilemma comes in, and it causes a situation where Rudy now is guarding the worst 3-point shooter, or at least the guy that you would want to take the three. I mean, I don't think I would want Morris or Batum or Paul George. Or anybody, or Reggie Jackson or Luke Kennard to take these threes. Man is the guy. Man is the guy that you want to take the three in those situations, because everybody else is so good. And Man is a little bit unproven in that category of being able to shoot threes. And last night, oh man, I mean, he shoots 70% from three, 15 of 21 from the field. Look, I think in the NBA, when you can be able to get guys from your team to score over 20, it's a big thing, especially with this Clippers team. And this is why I didn't ultimately think the Jazz could overcome the Clippers, because the Clippers are too much on defense. And then the fact that the Clippers really just needed either like Reggie Jackson or Marcus Morris to drop 20. Like if you look at the Dallas series, like George and Kawhi, for as much flack as George gets, he's going to get his. Kawhi's going to get his. But if somebody else can step up on the offensive side and at least provide a 20-point game, which again Morris and Jackson are capable of doing, then I think that's just absolutely, killer for the team that they're playing. This game, I'm watching the game and I say to myself, okay, George is probably going to get 20 to 25 for sure. I think that's just a shoo-in. And then, so at this point, it's like, okay, well, who do we watch? We watch Marcus Morris and we watch Reggie Jackson. Because nobody's gonna sit here and say that, oh yeah, Terrence Mann's gonna go get 20 tonight. It's crazy. He wasn't even playing to begin in the series. So it's a day that you can love Terrence Mann. We'll see what he can do in the next series. It's not like, there are going to be people out there that say Terrence Mann is the third wheel that the Clippers need. I just totally could not disagree more. I mean, again, you can't get too overly emotional about one game. And you definitely see people get overly emotional about it when it's the final game of a series, but it's not like Terrence Mann's going to be the guy in or at least the third option over there in LA. But let's get back on track. Rudy Gobert, wow. The 5-out offense definitely creates a dilemma on offense and defense. So on offense, the Clippers, when they're on offense, they essentially are saying, okay, and Ty Lue talked about this. When Rudy is in the game, we're going to shoot threes. When Favors is in the game, we're going to try to take it to the basket. Gobert was absolutely insane as far as how inside he wants to play. And I understand that that's kind of just in his DNA like that. And people need to realize that too, is that he doesn't play on the perimeter. Like everyone's going to say, oh, this is your defensive player of the year. Now, granted, I will say this. I don't know if you can give Rudy Gobert the defensive player of the year anymore after a performance like this. I just think similar how you can't give Giannis 3 MVPs in a row after what he did in the playoffs. It's a similar narrative. I can't see the Rudy situation and him being defensive player of the year again. For sure not next year. It's just going to be, there's going to be too many people saying we have a 4-time defensive player of the year and he can't even do anything in the playoffs and he's neutralized in the playoffs. But so they basically will attack the 3 when Rudy's in there. And essentially there were so many shots that the Clippers took that were just wide open threes. And we really hype up Terrence Mann, but in reality, Batum had open threes. Reggie Jackson had, open threes throughout this series. Marcus Morris and Paul George and, Beverly kind of took some contested ones in this game. But Kennard in some games in the series had taken open 3-point shots. And it's really bad. And what do you do if you're the Jazz? I mean, you're a team that is built because of your lack of perimeter defenders. You have built your defense on the foundation of, we're going to stay in front of our guy on the perimeter and take away the 3 as best we can, and then force guys to get kind of funneled into Rudy, and Rudy will protect the paint better than anybody else in the NBA. And that's why he's the defensive player of the year. You can go look at the numbers. I mean, he's the most players, or I should say he is the player that leads the NBA in shot attempts defended. So people are going at him. And he still is providing a very low field goal percentage when people are shooting on him. Now, again, that's at the rim. But, Rudy's 43% at the rim, or just overall, as what his defensive field goal percentage is. And then you look at, Jokic, and Jokic is, 53. You're scoring more times than not against Jokic. So it's unfortunate because The Jazz, again, because they're built like this, what is their option? We're gonna kill them either way, and this is the pickle, you can call it, that the Jazz were in, is that they either take Rudy off the floor and say, okay, now our defensive player of the year is off the floor, and a guy that we have is really our highest paid player. He's off the floor now, and we're just gonna match the 5 out. We're gonna bring Ingles or Clarkson in, and we're gonna match it. And at that point, you're kind of like, okay, maybe they match size for size. But the Jazz, again, still don't have guys that can beat people consistently off the dribble. Conley last night was not great. Conley just, again, I don't blame him because he came off of his injury. We saw how James Harden was when he came off of his injury. It just, to me, it doesn't really look to me like anybody could stay in front of anybody for the Jazz. And that's why they have Rudy in there, because they know they're just going to give easy baskets inside anyway. So it might as well say, we're going to have these teams shoot a difficult shot. Again, it's a farther distance, and we're going to allow the guy who is the most unproven to be able to take those shots. And that's what they did. That's what they elected on. I think it was probably going to go on. I think it went on for a lot longer than what should have been. You got to call timeout in some situations. However, during this run in the third quarter that the Clippers had, there was a couple possessions where the Jazz took 3 wide open threes and they just missed them. And then the Clippers come down and score off of it. So it's a game, man. It really is a chess match. And for the more people that you see on NBA Twitter or anything like that, like you'll know that they know what they're talking about, because it is an ultimate chess match. I mean, Ty Lue stopped playing Zubac. He stopped completely from playing Cousins. If it wasn't for the Kawhi injury, he'd probably stop playing. He did stop playing Rondo. Rondo wasn't even dressed for a game. So we got to give credit to the adjustments made by Ty Lue. And this series, and even really last series too, it really shows you that people can't pass up on this guy. It can't be ignorant to the fact that Ty Lue's a good coach. I mean, he's a good coach. We have to be able to say that now. Like, if you're doubting that still and saying, oh, Ty Lue just won off of LeBron's back and, all this stuff. It's like, no, got to give credits to when credit's due. So Ty Lue, I mean, I'm sure the Pelicans would have loved to have Ty Lue instead of Stan Van Gundy this year. I don't feel like that's a horrible thing to think. I want to talk about the defense of the Clippers, because we talked about the offensive side and what they do on offense, but what the defense forces and how they took Rudy Gobert out of the game. Now, Conley would help if he was healthy in the pick and roll, because I feel like he holds on to the ball for the right duration. When Donovan's in the game and he wants to play point guard, it's just you can see that he doesn't fully know. He wants to kind of hurry things up. He wants to fire the pass inside to Rudy when it's not even there. He doesn't make the right read consistently. And I think even he can admit that, yeah, that's probably something I need to do better on. But yeah, Terrence, I mean, the defense essentially is forcing the Jazz to get out of their pick and roll and play ISO. And that honestly is the game. The Clippers are saying, we're going to play ISO against you with the small ball lineup, and we know that you can't play ISO against us because we're going to switch everything, and going ISO is totally against what the Jazz try to do. And it shakes them up. I mean, Patrick Beverley just comes off the bench and is an absolute monster. He's a monster. And the Jazz have no ability to get around Beverley. I know Beverly's a good defender, really good defender, but you got to be able to break it somehow. But yeah, the Clippers stepped up their game. They win it on defense. There's no way the Jazz were even really looking for Rudy. And when they did, it was more times than not, it was a very bad situation for Rudy to be in because they'll pick and roll it and then give it to Rudy 20 feet from the basket. And he has to take 3 dribbles to get in, or what's the plan there? And there's a lot of issue going there. But I did want to. That's kind of what the Clippers forced it into, and that's the series is the Rudy Gobert situation. And again, like if it happens to Anthony Davis or if it happens to Bam Adebayo, they're getting cooked. Everybody's going to get cooked in the playoffs, right? Everybody. I don't think there's anybody in the whole playoffs here that hasn't been grilled by these quote unquote fans on Twitter. Lakers get grilled, Nuggets get grilled. I mean, Jokic. I mean, I'll tell you what. If you're the MVP, if you're the best player in the league, I don't know if you should be swept. I do not think you should be swept at all. Couple more inputs here. More focus on the Jazz. I don't think that Joe Ingles is lasting much longer in the NBA. He's older. Again, people need to realize he came into the league when he was a little bit older as opposed to your 19 or 20-year-old rookies or 18-year-old rookies. So he, watching this game, he just was really just out of it. I mean, he's the least athletic guy on the floor. When it kind of was those starters of when Joe was in starting for Conley, like he's obviously the least athletic guy on the court at that with those 10 guys out there. And I mean, the dude was runner up for 6th man of the year. There's a lot of people in the media that believe that Ingles should have won the 6th man of the year because we typically just give it to the guy who's the highest scorer off the bench. And that's fair. I actually think, Ingles wouldn't have been a horrible choice. I think there's a reason why he was the one to present Clarkson because he was literally the second place vote in a lot of people's minds. And he was just absolute garbage in these first 2 games. These first 2 series, I should say, for the Jazz. I mean, even if the Jazz come back and win this, they still have to go through Phoenix, who is well rested, and the Jazz are still hurt. So it was just an uphill battle. The moment that like Conley was missing multiple games, it was going to be hard. And maybe I think the way this series went is kind of the way the Jazz season went. As far as I think they overachieved with getting the first 2 wins. I know people are going to say, "Oh, well, they just held home court and that's what they're supposed to do," and all that. But man, I didn't think, I thought the Clippers were going to win the series. I did not think for a moment that they would win or that they would lose the first 2 games. But Joe Ingles, I think, is shot. His contract ends next season, at the end of next season. So it would not shock me at all if he's done after that. He's a definitely loved in the Utah Jazz fandom. But he is not the kind of guy that is going to make your team that much better in the playoffs. Quick note about Ty Lue, because he was, again, so great in this series, man. Ty Lue elects to sit Marcus Morris in the 4th quarter of this Game 6 finale. It was wild to see that because Morris in the last game had performed very well. Morris in the last game against the Jazz in Game 5 had 25. You want to know what he had the game before? He had 24. So going into Game 6, the guy's has the last 2. He's kind of caught his groove a little bit. He's shooting really well from 3 and from the field overall. He's getting buckets. And Ty Lue elects to sit him because of the Terrence Mann situation, and then he also elects to bring in Beverly to keep Beverly in there, because he adds such great defense against the Jazz. So credit to Ty Lue there. I mean, and credit to some of these Clippers guys that they kind of were just like, yeah, we're okay with that. Can we get some more respect for Ty Lue? I'm telling you, New Orleans kicking themselves. They didn't. They couldn't get this hire fixed, or at least set, I should say. Mike Conley is going to be a free agent this upcoming offseason. The Jazz can retain him. However, doing so would create the situation of retaining Mike Conley would put the Jazz in the luxury tax. So, and again, if you do that, this team's really returning everybody once they bring Conley back. But is that good enough? Like, they won't have as much flexibility to be able to get somebody else. Could they trade Favors to a team that needs some rim protection? Maybe, and like get like maybe a better scorer or a better defender on the perimeter. That's going to be tough because this team is very similar next year. So it'll be an interesting offseason or an interesting summer for the Jazz to see what they do there. I don't think Conley will leave. I think the Jazz will give him money. I mean, he was a first-time All-Star here this year. I think he likes the community. I think he likes being a part of the Jazz. And I don't think he's at the point where he's like, I'm just going to go ring chase somewhere and take the minimum. I mean, if you're going to take the minimum, as much as we'll take with the Jazz and we can spend money elsewhere. One thing also about the Jazz that really frustrated me watching the series is the lack of Bojan Bogdanovic. The guy can score, and while he's not an elite scorer, I mean, he's a good scorer in the league. You saw a couple times where he was hitting threes. You saw a couple times when he was driving to the basket. You see sometimes where he gets into the paint, does a little fadeaway jump shot. He can make shots. He's talented on the offensive side of the ball. And they just never really trusted him at any point. They never, like, every time it was like, hey, let's throw the ball to somebody who can go get us a bucket. Every time it was Clarkson or it was Donovan Mitchell. Never was it Bogey. The Jazz never attacked mismatches with aggressiveness that they needed to. Again, you can say maybe some of that is from Donovan being hurt, but we don't know. I think a lot of this was mental for the Jazz, and that's the concerning thing is that I think some of it was mental because some guys weren't making the right reads. Some people weren't playing as aggressive. But then, even that, like, you get yourself hyped up for a game and you say, oh, okay, this is the moment now that I'm going to step up my game. I'm mentally locked in. But you look at your personnel and it's still not good enough. That is frustrating. And that is what Jazz fans need to be worried about is that the team is not built to win in the postseason. If there was no pandemic, this team wins 55 games last year and probably is the third seed. Didn't happen that way. Weird bubble situation. They lose Bogey. Lose to the Nuggets last year after blowing a 3-1 lead. Other quick opinions here on the Jazz before I talk quickly about the Suns and Clippers game or series. They have Niang also as a free agent. I don't know if he's back, not so much because he didn't play good in the playoffs at all. But Favors but Niang is also a free agent, and I just don't think they retain him because I think there's going to be a team that says we want a stretch forward that can come off the bench and do a little bit of that for us. Maybe. But even then, like, they're going to be into the luxury, I should say, with Conley resigning, and then they would want to add on top of that Niang, especially when you blow a series lead in the second round. It's interesting decisions for the owner Ryan Smith and the general management and front office of Utah. Favors also, Derek Favors is also still under contract, but you wonder if they need to lighten their hit of being in the luxury tax by maybe moving off of his contract. We don't know. We'll see. Also, Donovan now has entered the realm of being a very, very good player in the league, a very great player. I mean, he goes off for 39, 9, and 9. And not good enough to win the game. So you kind of get this feeling of, is this going to leak into a Luka situation where he's not happy with the team? I think ESPN has blown up a little bit of like the unsalvageable situation that Donovan was in last year. Like that was completely overblown. But, you don't know. Donovan's a very emotional player. And so you kind of get worried sometimes if you watch him, you're like, could he leave? Could he leave in the summer of, I believe it's 2025? I mean, and for anybody that says, oh, the Donovan's going to leave, welcome to New York, all that kind of crap. I mean, look, you're not going to get him until the 2025-26 season. And even like you're just not. Sorry. It doesn't happen. Unless he would just completely ask for a trade, which I just don't think is possible and likely. It's not going to happen. Sorry. But yeah, he enters the waters of like Zion Williamson and Luka as far as like, you got to keep him happy. People are saying fire Quinn Snyder. The series, look, I'm not even going to touch that because that is not even remotely why this team lost the series, because of Quinn Snyder. Absolutely not. You want to blame it? Go rewatch all the games. Go watch them at half speed and really tell me that Quinn Snyder is the reason. The one mistake that he made in Game 6 was the fact that he didn't slow down the momentum that was coming from the Clippers and call timeout. But even that, like, I don't know if that's the biggest thing. I'll do a separate video on I'll do a separate video on the Suns and the Clippers matchup before they play tomorrow. But yeah, interesting time to be a Jazz fan, man. It sucks. Personally, I am, but I don't let that, leak into what I think. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's the ref's fault for anything. Look, Clippers were the better team. I thought the Clippers would win. They won it in 6. And it's unfortunate for the Jazz, though, that they lost these last 2 without Kawhi Leonard. But yeah, that is it. I'm going to throw these out more as far as any NBA news goes. But you guys have a good day.